Hello and welcome to another edition of the RotorHub International Podcast. In fact, this is episode 5 of season 2. I'm Gideon Ewers, I'm the editor of RotorHub International, and joining me today is an extraordinary individual. All of us pilots are, of course, extraordinary, but Nicola is especially extraordinary. Nicola Winter, fighter pilot, astronaut, and now HEMS pilot. Nicola, thanks for spending the time this morning.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Come on, Nicola, it's an interesting progression, let's just talk about that story of what drew you to aviation. Was it something that even as a child you're going, yeah, that's for me. I need to be up there?
Yes, I was drawn in. I was like 3 years old, and we took our first vacation by plane from Germany to Greece. And my parents woke me up in the middle of the night. It was like 3 in the morning, which was already very exciting. And when we drove to the airport, which was this bustling hub of activity and very exciting and mysterious, I'm like, God, that's so cool. And then I saw the airplanes in this case taxiing around very sluggish and heavy. And then they got onto the runway and, throttles up and lifted off. And it became this elegant thing gliding through the skies. And I was like, oh my God, this is so exciting. I must do this. And I always followed that dream until like 16 years old. I realized I was very short. I just never grew tall. I'm a meter 60 short, and that was too short for Lufthansa. And Lufthansa at the time was in Germany, the only airline that was paying for your training. And I was not brave enough to pay, 100,000 euros or whatever
Euros,
it was at the
sure,
time,
yeah.
right? So I looked for alternatives and then I found the Air Force. And I was like, oh, my dad is so much more exciting. There's no passengers. How amazing. There's an afterburner and you can go supersonic. And I watched too much Top Gun and I was like, that's it.
That's the place for
So,
me. So you had an interesting progression because you went, from through the training progression and straight on to tornadoes, yeah?
yes. Yeah, the Germans have the option to go fighter pilot with or without academic training, so with or without getting your bachelor's degree. And I was lucky enough to be selected without, which I really mean lucky enough because it means I was 22 years old when I was a qualified tornado pilot. And that's really cool, right? I started at 19 and at 22 I was flying fast jets through Germany and also low levels through the UK, which is amazing, right? I got to fly through or over Loch Ness to Lossy Mouse and stuff. So that was really
Yeah, I
good
mean
times.
it's pretty cool, like being 22 and having the ultimate goal racer machine, really. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really quite cool. So let's think about that, that progression, and then this whole foray into, the sky for you. You decided wasn't the limit. You thought about, venturing out into space as an astronaut. How did that come to pass?
Well, in my mind, it's almost a natural progression, right? Because initially, like, oh, the dream of becoming a fighter pilot. And then you do that and you're like, oh, that's cool. So what's next? Because also all of a sudden, everyone I knew was a fighter pilot. So you're not special anymore.
Hmm.
And of course, I was not the worst, but also I was not the best fast jet pilot that they have. I always consider myself to be in the top 30% hanging out there somewhere in the training hall. So almost all of Europe's fast jet pilots train in Texas in Wichita Falls, Shepherd Air Force Base, and they have a Hall of Fame. And to be in a fighter pilot's Hall of Fame, right, the most famous and accomplished graduates, you almost have to become an astronaut, right? So every day we would walk the halls of our school or of our version of uni and see all these astronauts. And I realized that I was halfway there, right? In order to be an astronaut, you either have to be a pilot, ideally fast jets or helicopters, or be academically very accomplished, which at that point in time I was not. But halfway there, and there's much fewer pilots than there's academically accomplished people. So I thought I had a real shot. And then it's just cool to be among real pioneers, right? I really feel like it's at the final frontier, pushing humanity's limits technologically, and also real adventure because even fast jets or rescue helicopters, it's a very safe environment. We know what we're doing. We have 1,000 rules, about 500 too many, in my opinion. But out there, it's still a little bit the Wild West, and I think that would be really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I a little bit grew up with that experience because as a small boy, I lived in Clear Lake, Texas, which is where Johnson Space Center is, and it was in the glory days towards the latter part of Gemini and through Apollo and stuff like that. And so, it's interesting what you said. Oh, all my friends are fighter pilots. When I was a kid, in my school, at least one kid in every class, had a dad who was an astronaut. It just, well, so what? That guy down the road's been to the moon. Whoops. But it is extraordinary when you think about those things, isn't it? That the whole complexity of space flight. I mean, yeah, I'm a space junkie, as you can probably tell, but uh, it really is. It's right out there at the edge, and I can see the attraction, especially as the. But it's interesting, isn't it, that question between the academic astronaut candidates who have to be, super duper crazy brainy, and the guys who drive the bus. Personally, like you, I'd rather drive than be academic, but maybe that's because I'm not that bright. But it is that interesting thing, but even so, the opportunities for that, for pushing that out, they have their limitations. They're subject, aren't they? They're sort of a little bit subject to, you know, the variables of government or whatever to get to
Yes.
fruition. Yeah, and so I
They're
guess
very far and few in between right now.
yeah, the opportunities are small, right? Um, it's kind of interesting. I guess that brings me into my next point, which is to, ask you about this transition then from the fast jet world, the space exploration world, into this migration to flying rotary and flying HEMS. How did that come to pass?
Well, there's a couple of different things to it. So, for one, I passed the astronaut selections twice, but currently there's no flight opportunity. So that's why I have to have
Yes,
a normal day job. Um, in plus, it was funny because the older European astronaut corps, the class that was selected in 2009, they have one helicopter pilot, is Tim Peake, the British astronaut, who's not active
sure.
anymore. But all the others just took helicopter flying lessons because that's how you land on the moon, or it's the
Mhm.
closest thing to it. Which I had to laugh because our current class of the ESA astronauts of 2022 has two professional pilots. Sophie Adenau from France, she's a helicopter test pilot, military helicopter pilot, and me. And I was like, you wouldn't have to train them if you just pick the people who already
You
have the
can already
skills.
fly them.
It aligns really, really well. But in the absence of that opportunity, I was like, okay, what's the next cool thing? What can I do with my life? And flying fast jets is a really fun, cool, rewarding activity in your 20s and 30s. Um, but it takes you all around the world. It's very unstable for your family. And so I wanted something a little bit different. Looking to the airplane world and the civilians, I'm like, okay, all of that flying is boring. And the opportunities to do something that also is meaningful and has real purpose is almost zero. On the side, because I also am very interested in that part, I became a paramedic. So I was driving ambulances for fun on the weekends around the streets of Cologne, and I found that to be a very rewarding job. Unfortunately, it pays nothing. So, in order to combine it, be like, okay, I really like emergency medical services. I have skills as a pilot. Flying helicopters is really cool. So now it becomes the perfect combination because I get to do what I love and a little bit of adventure and crazy technology combined with real purpose. So that's the perfect thing for me. And it took the whole journey, right? Because I did not have a helicopter license. I had to get all that. It had to be all privately funded. You get some relief coming from the airplane world, but it still was six figures that I had to spend on that.
Brilliant. Yeah.
So quite a journey and a commitment. And I had no idea what it was going to be like before I started, but within the first couple hours, I felt like a whole other world in aviation was opening up. And I finally have become a complete pilot, and it's almost hard to describe to someone who's only on one side or the other. But now it's all kinds of different aerodynamics and different ways of moving through the air, and having all those options and all that knowledge available. Um, like for example, one engine out ops or single engine ops in airplanes and helicopters is utterly different. And knowing all of those options made me feel much more knowledgeable about the
Mm.
subject.
You don't have to. I mean, I've recently spent most of my life in fixed wing and made this transition in recent years to helicopters, and everything you just said, 100%. I mean, it is the whole new world. I was talking to a fixed wing friend of mine, and he said, "Well, what's the difference?" And I said, "Well, that world below 30 knots is just, you know, everything is." It's wild, it's the thing. Another friend of mine, I'll give him a shout out, Tony Ridley, a long-time helicopter pilot and former chairman of the FALPA helicopter committee. Riddles, yes, you were right. Helicopters are better. Thank you. You've told me this for years. But yeah, I get that. But let's talk about those HEMS missions and the interesting thing, because I mean, really, we talked earlier about spaceflight being out on the edge in terms of aviation. But also, I mean, when you think about the challenges of HEMS, in many ways, it presents its own similar challenges because when you launch on a mission, you don't know it may be somewhere you've never been. It's uncharted territory. It's what are my obstacles? What are my challenges? What am I facing? So I guess there's that evolution that you're trying to, one, succeed in the mission, but doing it safely, and those challenges too. Let's touch a little bit on your thoughts about that.
Well, I think you have to be much more grown up and mature as a pilot to be a good HEMS pilot, because all of a sudden now there's real life pressure because it's a third person's life or well-being on the line, right? As a fast jet pilot, I only ever dealt with professionals. Even if we would have to have an accident or something would go wrong, it would only affect professionals. So that is different. Now in this case, it's innocent, if you will, 16-year-old that had a motorbike crash. And in day VFR conditions, that's all fun and games. That job's real easy and nice. And you go look, oh, there's a wire, blah, blah, blah. It becomes real challenging quickly, like in November in Germany, and you have fog and you have like really limited conditions. But now you have that pressure of making it happen. And I think it's a real psychological battle, and you have to be very in touch with yourself to know your limit and not underfly your limit. Also, right? We don't want to let patients just lay on the road if we could have done something, but not over push it because there's no point in laying right next to them, right?
Yeah.
And then I realized I've almost gotten too comfortable too fast because now I know my area and almost all the wires and everything that can hurt you, and to snap out of it and be like, oh, I do not know every single electrical line that's out there. And then I think especially flying with NVGs or under invis conditions in limited weather, that become real tricky, right? And it's like an instant death kind of scenario where in the fast jet world, you're high up. You can usually see it coming at least for a couple seconds
Hmm.
that you're on a collision course with someone, that you have a technical emergency, things like that. But wires or trees or things like that will catch you off guard, and you won't even know that you have died. So, well, that's the truth, right?
Yeah,
You're
it's
just
true. Yeah.
buried and you're gone. And so having that and having that awareness every single day over a career of maybe 20, 30 years, that I think is the real challenge. Plus, of course, the technical skills. I'm still in training there. I'm not allowed to fly hoist operations yet, which of course is that's always the main goal, right? And him is to fly in the mountains and do the crazy hoist rescues. And we had one HEMS operation when I was a fast jet pilot, where one of my colleagues was picked up by the Swiss guys from a crazy steep mountainside, which I'm like, okay, that's impressive.
That's
That's,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, they make the Top Gun movies, but that is the top of the world in flying skills, right? That's the best of the best. So, and of course, that's, being The modest me, that's the goal.
Yeah, the goal is to, why not? Why not? Why not be the best? If you're going to do it, why not be the best at it? It is that interesting thing though. You talked about, the technology is changing and the techniques changing. And it's kind of interesting a little bit because, with your experience and background on the as a paramedic, and that training you've had, you've seen this sort of evolution in HEMS from just, flying out, scooping somebody up and scooting to the nearest hospital to this sort of much more aggressive in the field ER type role.
Yeah.
And that's quite an extraordinary evolution, which continues at pace, I guess.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
very advanced medical technology we have. We bring an ultrasound, we bring an automatic CPR machine, we have blood on board. So if somebody can be rescued, I'm very confident that he or she will be rescued by the team we bring. And then I'm always very impressed. And of course, that's different from country to country. But sometimes people in Germany are a little bit negative. Germans, right? We're known for that. It's a little bit negative and complaining about the government and stuff. But the picture we have, or the view and the ethics we have on life and the worst of a single person's life, I admire every day because if just one person is severely hurt, the amount of forces and skilled people that will show up is incredible, right? It's a helicopter with 3 or 4 professionals on board. It's 20 or 30 firefighters. There's more paramedics on the ground, and the team is crazy. And the amount of money that is spent to just save one person's life, I always really admire that, and I'm very happy that we do it this way.
It is cool. It is extremely cool. Let's talk, we also touched about, we talked about the medical technology, but what about some of the airframe technology? Now, your employer, you are Airbus through and through, and I think also you're, the mix of the 135s and 145s, but coming soon, the 140s as well. So, another string to add to the bow, I guess. I was very lucky. I was one of the first people to see a 140 for real. Airbus gave a sneak preview. It's a cool looking aircraft, actually.
Yeah.
Uh, well, everyone's seen it now, but those sort of things. There's always something new to learn. There's always something different. What about that? Let's just touch a little bit about that concept. Do you stay on one type, or do you switch between the two types? Is it just one type per base, or is there a rotation through?
So for me, it's just one type
Hmm.
currently. Eventually, there will probably be an evolution to both.
Hmm.
But usually it's one base, one type, because we have 38. So I work for ADAC, right? For ADAC, for the yellow ones. 38 bases and 200 pilots. And if you mix them all, that is going to be very hard logistically to handle. So it makes sense. And then it depends on the contractor, so it's a whole regional thing in Germany on what they requested, right? Because the smaller helicopter obviously has some cons because it is smaller, but then it is also cheaper in operations. And so every region in Germany decides for themselves what kind of services they want to offer their citizens. And there is pros and cons to all of them, and the 140 is probably going to fill in the gap a little bit. And I think it's cool, right? Every couple of years to be able to learn something new. Of course, there is a switch from the demand for real manual skills in the 70s, right? Flying a UE to now the 145 offers a lot of pilot assistance, right? So it's much easier. You don't even have a twist throttle anymore,
Mm.
which is even for me as a rather new pilot. I'm like, how can I not roll my throttle off? That's awkward. Um, but it really helps you, and it is so easy comparably to fly. Of
Mhm.
course, in the airplane world, these things are much easier to fly already. But then you have an information overload, and you have the 4-axis autopilot, and complacency is right around the corner, right? Because you think, oh, I know everything. I have perfect picture. I know perfectly where I'm at and all the obstacles and all the weather. And we have a weather radar, and it can
And
also catch you off guard, right? If you're
yeah,
not paying
paints you right
attention.
into that little corner.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's the famous last words like, "What's it doing now?"
What's it doing now? And as you always will say, the one that gets you is the one that you don't see. Yeah. Uh,
Hmm.
well, Nicola Winter, we have been beaten by the time, which is a tragedy because I could talk to you for hours. It's always great to hear stories, share ideas. And of course, from someone as accomplished as you, that's even more special. We'll be back again in 2 weeks' time with another edition of the RotorHub International Podcast. And don't forget, during European Rotors in just a few weeks' time, we'll be having daily podcasts right there from the show floor in Cologne. So until next time, fly safe, keep the blue side up.